Have you ever bought a book for a literature class only to find that the edition you ordered was awful, oversized, tiny font, or full of errors? Or maybe you've bought a book that you thought was fine only to find out that your professor thought it wasn't. If that's been your case, then you're not alone. My name is Roger, I'm a literature professor, and in this video I'll help you understand how to make better choices when ordering books for your literature courses. I'll explain why there's so many awful editions out there, but also what makes a good edition good. So let's jump right into it. Bad editions aren't much of an issue if you're taking a course in contemporary literature, because most texts for these courses are under copyright, which means that only one or at most a few publishers are legally allowed to bring out editions at the same time. But if you're taking a course on 19th century American literature, Victorian literature, or Shakespeare, then you're reading materials that are public domain. That means that you're much more likely to find that there are several editions available. Let's give it a try. If you go on Amazon and search for David Copperfield by Charles Dickens, you run into literally dozens of different editions. How can you tell which ones are good and which ones are not? Often enough, they're similarly priced. The review section isn't that helpful because Amazon clusters together reviews of different editions, so you can't tell which ones are getting the one-star reviews. Nor should you trust the editions that are sponsored by Amazon. In fact, those tend to be pretty bad. The problem here is something called print on demand. Print on demand is a new publishing model that dramatically reduces the upfront costs of publishing books. In this model, publishers don't need to print and store hundreds of copies of their books, hoping that at some point they will sell. Instead, they print books as people are actually ordering them through outlets like Amazon or Barnes & Noble. And this has been good news not only for print-on-demand companies, but also for self-publishing authors, and even traditional presses like Cambridge that rely on the print-on-demand model. But this system does come with its downsides. Most of the copies of David Copperfield we saw on Amazon were print-on-demand. If you order a copy, the publisher will find the text for free on the internet, print it in book format, and then ship it to you. And because Amazon takes a cut off the sales price, the profit margins are very low for such companies, which means that they don't have the budget for careful editorial work. The result is what you see here. The book on the right is a print-on-demand edition of Jane Eyre. Notice how oversized it is compared to the book on the left, which is a regular paperback edition. The reason for the size difference is that it reduces the number of pages and makes the book cheaper to print. When you open it, this is what you see. There is a lot of text per page with no paragraph indentation, and the text was most likely copy-pasted from an online version without any revision. So if you're choosing your own books for your literature classes, then the first thing to keep in mind is to avoid print on demand. Before telling you how to do that, here's a word about accessibility. You might wonder, if these texts are available online, why not use them for your classes? There are good reasons for preferring a print edition, but ultimately this depends on a decision by your teacher. I generally allow my students to use free online text or even to use editions they happen to already have. Books can be expensive, and I want my courses to be affordable. So check what your course policy is. If you can afford to buy the books and you don't already own a copy, then here's some advice to help you find a good edition. First, most obviously, make sure to check the syllabus. Professors very often indicate which edition they expect you to buy. If the information in the syllabus is unclear, then ask them for the International Standard Book Number, or ISBN, for each book on the syllabus. You can then use that number to search for the exact edition that you're required to be using. If the syllabus doesn't ask for specific editions, then there are two rules for choosing a good one. The first is to look for well-known publishers or series. For courses in English or American literature, this usually means Penguin, Oxford, Norton, Bedford, Broadview, Arden. Now, maybe you're not familiar with that many publishers. In that case, this is where rule number 2 comes in. Choose editions that identify the editor by name. The editor's name appears sometimes on the front cover, sometimes on the back cover, and usually in the book description. These two editions of David Copperfield are both by Penguin, but this one doesn't mention an editor anywhere, while this one does, edited with an introduction and notes by Jeremy Tambling. This is a better edition, although they are both by Penguin. Now, why does this matter? What does the editor do after all? First, as the example I just gave illustrates, editors write introductions and annotations for our books, which is particularly helpful in the case of older literature that requires contextualization or definitions of words that have changed their meanings or are no longer used. In 18th century English, for example, dear could mean expensive. To be nice was to be fussy. And to discover meant to reveal. And when Emma finds Mr. Elton making violent love to her, it is helpful to know that to make love was just to declare your feelings. Otherwise, you may seriously misunderstand what's going on. So annotations are great. But there's something even more important that editors do. They're responsible for establishing the text. Take the case of Shakespeare's Hamlet. When a modern publisher decides to bring out a new edition of that play, ideally they should go back to the words as Shakespeare has written them. The issue is that there is no surviving manuscript, so publishers need to go back to early print editions. The problem is that there are 3 of them. Hamlet exists in the so-called first quarto, the second quarto, and the first folio editions. These 3 editions are very different. They have different contents, different lengths, and different versions of the same lines. So which of these versions should a publisher choose when bringing out a new edition of the play? That's where the editor comes in. Editors of Shakespeare editions are professional Shakespeare scholars who are hired by publishers to go back to these original editions, compare them, and then make educated decisions about what Shakespeare is most likely to have actually written. In the case of Hamlet, they usually combine elements from all 3 texts to establish a text for the modern edition. And in their commentary on the text, they point out important differences between these early editions. This is all important information to have if you want to improve your understanding of Shakespeare or write essays about his plays. Let me give you another example of why editions with an editor are better. Maria Edgeworth's novel Belinda was originally published in 1801 and then substantially revised in 1810. The original 1801 edition contains an interracial marriage between a white English farmer called Lucy and a black servant called Juba. This makes this novel fascinating for readers interested in racial relations and empire. But Edgeworth eliminated Juba from the 1810 edition because English readers, according to her, had been, quote, scandalized at the idea of a black man marrying a white woman, unquote. She accordingly replaced Juba with a white man called Jackson. This in itself makes the novel a valuable historical document about English attitudes towards blackness, as long as we know the publication history. But to know any of this, we need more than just the plain text. If you get a modern edition that silently reproduces the 1810 version, then you won't even know that the racial theme was there to begin with. A good edition like this one from Oxford, edited by Linda Bree, tells you which version of the text it is using, it is the 1801, and also discusses the revisions and Edgeworth's motivations for making them. Even better, it includes an appendix where you can read the sections that are different in the revised edition. This version of the text gives you much more to work with if you're writing a research paper on this particular novel. In general, editions like this one also offer a chronology of the author's life as well as suggestions for further reading. All of this is done by the editor. If you have the option to choose which editions to buy for your literature classes, avoid print on demand. Choose editions by well-known publishers, and choose editions that identify the editor. Such editions will give you a better text with introduction and notes, an account of differences between early editions, and a wide variety of additional materials. I hope this has been helpful. Enjoy your classes.